We are living in a computer-programmed reality, and the only clue we have to it is when some variable is changed and some alteration in our reality occurs. We would have the overwhelming impression that we were reliving the present, déjà vu, perhaps in precisely the same way, hearing the same words, saying the same words. I submit that these impressions are valid and significant, and I will even say this: such an impression is a clue that at some past time point a variable was changed, reprogrammed as it were, and that because of this an alternative world branched off.
Good evening and welcome to a special edition of 11th House Radio. I'm Robert Phoenix and we're broadcasting live from the home of Edgar Cayce, Virginia Beach, at the annual For Purpose Inc. conference. It feels like a concert sometimes. So welcome everybody out in the virtual realm, and welcome everybody here in the ballroom. Come on, let's get a little round of applause. See, I'm not lying. This is live. I haven't done too many live broadcasts like this with an audience, so it's kind of new for me. I mean, I'm usually just talking into this, and I don't have to look at anybody, right, except for my cats. So this is a really interesting experience. We're sharing the energy in real-time space, both here and in the virtual space as well. And tonight we're going to have some guests, some very special guests, and we're going to talk about this conference and the spiritual roots of this conference and why these people get together every year, come from all over the country, and some people even from other parts of the world to attend and get spiritual nurturing and astrological guidance and counseling and learn different techniques from a number of other people that come through. And it's been great. I've been here since Friday. Been having a great time. People here are wonderful, very loving, very caring, very open, non-judgmental group, and they have a young spirit. They're fresh and ready to learn and grow. This is been a great, great experience. One of the things that I have, my first impression as a person, as an astrologer, is the overwhelming scorpionic energy that's a part of this group, and obviously we're going to get into that. My first guest is going to be about 2 or 3 minutes away here from being introduced. That's Marvin Wilkerson, who's the keynote speaker at this event. We're going to talk a little bit about that. But it took me about 5 minutes, maybe 10 minutes, to start to move around the room and meet people. And I was blown away by the amount of loss that people here have had in their lives. And the attitude, the prevailing attitude, is one of love and courage and being really, really present, which speaks to the transformational qualities of Scorpio. And I have not seen people deal with really intense, personal, deep issues, deal with it so gracefully and courageously. So whatever you're doing here, it's working, because I saw it today. I saw it with your work today.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And I tried to understand for myself how, going through losing your son 3 months ago, how I would be able to go up in front of a group of people and lead a workshop like that. It blew me away.
Thank you.
So it speaks to what I'm talking about here. And of course, we got together right at the beginning of Scorpio and the Scorpio solar eclipse, which kicked all of this off. And that says a lot about the energy of the group as well. All right, so I'm going to stop talking, and I'm going to introduce my first guest. He's the keynote speaker. He did a presentation on, what was that, Sunday, when you did your presentation? Mm-hmm. Extremely powerful presentation. He combines elements of hypnotherapy and astrology, some of the moon phase work we're going to be talking about, and maybe a few other tricks that he hasn't really let on about yet. His name is Marvin Wilkerson, and he's the keynote speaker. He has a website called AstroMarv. You can find more about him there. There's a link on the show page. And why don't we just start? Let's just get into this, Marvin. Welcome. Thank you.
Well, thanks for having me.
So what I wanted to do is kind of what we're talking about when you sat down. I was really not aware of Buzz and his work. I'm sort of a savant and kind of in my own thing. And I wasn't really aware of the moon phase work and dissemination. So this is all very new to me, and I'm finding it fascinating. So what I wanted to do with you early on is to have you kind of fill people in about Buzz and the work ultimately, and then your relationship to it, and we'll just run with it from there.
Well, Buzz brought in the moon phases and stepped it up a notch from Dan Rudyard and Mark Robinson, and he added a couple of different elements to it. Specifically, he separated the phases into a masculine-feminine process in that cycle. He also added in the age arcs, and that gave him an ability to look at people's ages and give him the ability to go and start comparing what phase of life that we're in and how it relates to current conflict or challenges that people go through. So that was kind of the initial thing and impetus for his work. And of course, Buzz was always, he was very much into Native American culture, and Sun Bear was vitally important. And that led him into the Sun Bear's medicine wheel, which he was able to then combine the medicine wheel as well as the solar lunar phases that then allowed him to even enhance a greater healing, and then added that philosophical spiritual bend that Native Americans are famous for.
So when you did your presentation, you were moving around a representation of the moon phases that you bring with you. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay. Is this a normal mode of teaching this? Because I found it to be very interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, so do the Native Americans.
Yeah, yeah.
But yes, because Buzz always felt like, I mean, if you teach a cycle, you're teaching you're teaching the part of a spiral. So you teach in a circle, which gets you out of linear thinking and gets you away from just a sun square Saturn.
Right.
It gets you into a sun square Saturn in a first quarter square or a third quarter square,
right,
which all has different kinds of meanings and how it's going to affect and play out.
Right. So in essence, you're kind of reorienting your brain as well as you move around the circle.
We all need to think in cycles versus in think in linear terms.
Right. Really interesting. So Buzz planted this seed. 22 years later, you're still here. People are still doing the work. How did you meet Buzz, and how did you come across him?
Well, I met Buzz with my teacher, which was Vicki Green. She gave me a reading when I was 18 years old, which is 40-some-odd years ago now. And, of course, I took off from there. I never really stopped. Got deeply into it a little bit in 85, and then 92, I went to the Washington UAC conference and decided this is what I wanted to do. I was reasonably good at it.
Right.
And I talked to her about, hey, you think I could make a living?
Right.
And, of course, she lied. But so I got into it and started professionally doing it for the next 7 years. And of course, I mean, I love it. I mean, my whole language is astrologically bound. I wound up marrying a woman that is also an astrologer, and and does a couple of other things, but she has a nice big clientele. But we'll wake up 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, and we'll just start talking symbols, and that's our language.
Right. Yeah.
So
yeah, I get that. When you were a kid, did you read your horoscope at all? Were you interested in that way?
No, I was introduced at 18 years old. I came in from somewheres, and my mother had these books, and she was kind of exploring. And we were a Southern Baptist in Virginia, and that's pretty much how I believed. And then she said a couple of things, and I challenged it with biblical stuff and all of that. And she says, well, here, he said, read this, which was Krishnamurti's Think on These Things. Mm-hmm. And once I read that, then that blew out the whole circuitry of the Christianity and religion and all of that, because that went way out into my kind of realm. With a Sag Mercury, I mean, I want to blow everything out anyway.
Right.
And so that started me on a philosophical track that I've never left.
Yeah, yeah. Krishnamurti really does extend out to those pretty deep orbits.
You read a paragraph and then take like a day to get it delineated.
Yeah, absolutely.
So.
Can you talk a little bit about the work and the moon phases and give people a sense as to, as much as they can in about 5 or 10 minutes or so, how it breaks down?
The moon phases, they're really important. I mean, they connect you to the natural cycle, the biggest natural cycle in the sky.
Yeah.
So, I mean, nothing happens on this planet until that moon triggers it. Mm-hmm. So when you start following from the new moon, which is basically a seeding point, all the way around the whole cycle, when it's in a wax, more male.
Right.
And when it's in a waning stage, you think of it being much more feminine. You're letting go, you're processing what the waxing stage has brought to you. Mm-hmm. So now you're getting the end of the cycle. And then, of course, at the end of the cycle, just before new moon, that's obviously a letting go process. So you're letting go of everything every 29.6 days or 29.6 years, or if you carry out your initial impulse for 2 months, then it has to change on each cycle. Mm-hmm. So the moon following is, and of course, you can put it in the context of a 29.6 year cycle, mm-hmm. then obviously now you're looking at an evolutionary process.
Right.
That's going to repeat every 29.6 years.
Right.
So you go back into 8 phases. Well, now you go back through each phase will connect to another phase.
Right.
Which one of the ones that's very important to me is the one initially, when we are initially born, we go from 0 to 3.8 years old, 3.8 years old to 7 years old, and that's when patterns and scripts made by mother and father. Well, these start playing out again between 30 years old, 33 years old, and 33 to 37. Mm-hmm. And so these are all big time. Now we're starting to come into some of our own patterns and psychological issues.
Right.
And so you would just literally go at what issues or conflicts or challenges you come into. 30 to 33, you would go back to 0 to 3.8, mm-hmm. and the information is there.
Right.
You know exactly why the conflict and challenges started.
Right.
And so it really does. It seems like it's difficult, but just, when we come, as astrologers, we're used to dealing with 12 houses and all of that. Well, when you're a phase, when you watch phases, you're dealing with 8 phases.
Right.
So that's just in there, just a little bit.
Yeah.
And so that makes it so much more of a healing tool now.
Right.
Than just if you come get astrology reading and I tell you got a Sun square Saturn.
Yeah.
And you're going to go through hardship, disciplines, and frustrations.
Yeah.
How about if we call it a first quarter square, and we know now we understand that that's an evolutionary part of the process.
Right.
That coming in, that being the crisis and that leaving, and you know it's going to be a building process, and how you're going to use a Saturn square.
Right. So when you started your astrological work, where were you in this phase cycle?
Oh, goodness sakes. Well, I was roughly 42 years old, something like that, 43 years old.
Yeah.
And right now I forget what phase that is. But I know now that I'm in crescent phase.
You're crescent phase.
I just entered crescent phase at 62 years old, 63 years old. And so I'm around, end of my third cycle.
Right.
And so I've added a lot to the work and took it even a little farther than Buzz by looking at, Timothy Leary's brain circuitry, how we're programmed, and looking at the many dimensions that go on in humans and human psychology, and, of course, spirituality and how that's all done. So that's why it's so found at this point, because now I'm adding in a lot of the Native American and the galactic information that's coming now on the planet, and that's just taking it to a whole new level, which is we're all moving into a different level of awareness.
Right.
So,
what about neurosciences? Are you making any connections with neurosciences, brain chemistry, with the phase cycles?
You know what, Robert, I think that anything that you put on that phase wheel and in that medicine wheel, it's going to line up. And if it doesn't line up, then I don't care what science does. It has to fit that wheel, because there's too many paradigms that fit the wheel.
Right.
So that's the way I kind of work. If it fits on the wheel, then it works.
Right. By the way, one of our angels here brought up this was your cycle.
So I came in on an feminine emotional at 42 years old, and a gibbous cycle.
Right.
Which means that was a time to start doing internal analysis and working with people and be much more analytical and getting feedback into, as I'm a budding astrologer, getting feedback into my work and start getting to see multiple personalities and how the phases all work. So it was a really good analytic time. As I look at Gibbous now, with the work that I'm doing now, I look at it as this is a point of integration, and we got to stop looking outside for ourselves to having any expectation that there's answers external. So Gibbous is really a time to where if we're going to move at love on the medicine wheel, then we have to start moving more internally, realizing that we have every answer that we could ever want, and it's not external. And that's really the truth.
I was born on a new moon. What would that mean?
Well, when you're in a new phase, this is, it's got a little bit of that Aryan flavor to it, but I mean, a lot of when you're going to use it on a beginning of a project basis, which you can use this wheel. We can use the wheel on an hourly basis, a daily basis. The wheel basically works. I don't care if you make a 5-minute phone call, you're going to go from new to the end of the cycle. But when you get into new phase from a personality perspective, which is the way I see all phases.
Right.
I put them into personalities. I don't put them into projects.
Right.
It's a personality. How are you going to operate for 3.5 days? And in a new phase, you're going to have inclinations to be impulsive, be that Aryan, and important at new phase is to stop and think. Right. Which is not a good Aryan strong suit. Right. So we need to stop and think, be more mature about our emotions. Aries is more new phases, much about emotions. Right. And then maturing our emotions into making more adult decisions. Right. For all of our actions, instead of impulsively, spontaneously just doing things because we're excited by our sight or the impulsiveness of what's going to give us an instant gratification and reward.
Right. speaking of maturing, you have been away from this group for, 16 years? Is that right? Okay. Mm-hmm. So in some ways, you're kind of like the prodigal son. You come back.
Buzz wasn't real happy when I told him I connected that he was my father in another life.
Interesting. What's it been like for you to be away, and then what's it been like for you to come back? What's your experience been the past few years?
I've never stopped doing the work. I've never stopped doing my work. Mm-hmm. And I always was very much in. My first teacher, as far as that I really big time connected into, was Jeff Green, which was transformation of the soul. And when I met Buzz, that helped take me into that spiritual dimension. Mm-hmm. So once I started putting on all that, I've never stopped, whether I was a part of the group or not. My work in spiritual
going on.
Work has always kept going.
Right.
And I've added so much more to the work. And now when I come back to the group, it's still a little remedial and stuck in the past compared to what the information that's available to us now. Mm-hmm. And so I think that it has to evolve. It has to be get up to speed with actually that we're in now, which mm-hmm. is very much speeded up. Mm-hmm. And we're very much becoming much more aware spiritually. So we have to start using different language.
Right.
And when we start using the language of these times, then I think that we get more in tune. This is what Buzz always called it, on time. Mm-hmm. And so I think that that's what's really important right now for mm-hmm. this group and to continue the work, because obviously we're shifting in dimensional consciousness, and we are coming much more aware and in alignment with energies mm-hmm. and how to work with energies today. And that's really important part of the work.
Is this an emotional response you're having to being here, or is this a conceptual sort of, here's where we are now?
I think that probably, growing up in this and being at the first one, and I always wanted to be a big dog in some sort of way.
Right.
And it was an opportunity to come back, reconnect with some old people, old faces. And it was just something that I felt like that I could bring some new validity to the work, and new language, and a greater understanding. And so it was interesting to come back, see where they are, see what's happening, and being able to do that.
Let's talk about some of the other aspects of your work. You're also a hypnotherapist. You've mm-hmm. done some work in corporate America, probably with consulting, some deep coaching. You work with people that have habituation, get them out of their patterns. How does it all fit? How does it all work together?
Well, it's just like we're talking about the phases. I mean, basically, these are patterns and scripts. Mm-hmm. So anytime that we're dealing with let's go back to Sun Square Saturn, we're going to deal with a fear that you have in some respect to your purpose and identity and ego and life. Mm-hmm. And that fear is actually going to be based in a past emotional process that got put in when you were sometime in the back. All emotions are connected to the past. If you give me 101 emotions, I'll give you 101 past events. Mm-hmm. So it never really was completely satisfactory to me to be able to take somebody's chart, give them that kind of much information, and then they walk out the door. I wanted to have hands-on and really make a difference in their life. And with hypnotherapy, I can go in, I can look at a pattern, I can find the initial sensitizing event, and we can do business with it. We can get rid of it.
Right. And it all fits together. Do you ever have clients that just want the hypnotherapy? I don't want to know about astrology or moon phases. Right.
I'd say 80% of clients come in and just want hypnotherapy. Dealing in mainstream America, and I'm no longer just on the fringes of dealing with spiritual people or people that are aware of or buy into astrology. I pop up a solar chart on every client that I have. I read their energy. I know where they're at, and that tells me energetically what's going on.
Right.
And then I match what they say with what I know.
Right.
And so that allows me great insight. But the thing is, it allows me to go directly to an issue and a problem without having to run around and do a million questions.
Right. So they're faster.
I'm much faster.
It's efficient. So speaking of efficiency, you've done some work with corporate America, consulting, working with executives, Capricornian energy, and you're a Capricorn, aren't you?
I am.
Yeah. What was that like for you? Did you feel like you were kind of on equal footing with these people? Or?
Oh yeah. With a fourth house sun, I've had to grow in self-esteem and certainly self-image. Yeah. And I've been out there and I made as much money as that I'd ever dreamed about making, which gave me my so-called financial ability to relate to big-time people.
Right.
So once I was able to do that and satisfy that dream, well, now I feel on equal footing with anybody.
Right.
It doesn't make any difference. As a matter of fact, I probably got more insight than 90% of them.
Right.
So it's pretty hard to be intimidated when you know something more about them than they could ever possibly know about you.
What would you, as far as your insight into corporate America and people in positions of power, what perhaps might be a common theme or perhaps a vulnerability that you were able to discover that people outside of that world may not be aware of? A humanizing factor, perhaps, at times.
Well, just about everything, whether you go into a sales department or whatever you go into, stress is probably the biggest factor that people do not realize that they live with, and it's 85% of the problem of all major medical problems. And stress just comes from the fact of belief systems that we all grow up. It comes from the fact that we feel like we're not getting enough done. That's unbelievable. And the amount of confidence. I mean, confidence is something I've never met anybody who couldn't use a little confidence, except maybe Donald Trump.
Right. So I just noticed that the moon is, I think it's around 7 or 8 Capricorn. Is that right? So is that conjuncting your sun?
No, sun is 13.
13. So
it will be later tonight when I'm asleep. So maybe I'll get a hit.
Yeah. So what's your life like in Nashville? Practice? You got your private practice?
You got a very, very fast-growing practice, and it's expanding. I go from smoking to panic attacks to stress, anxieties, weight loss. And it's very gratifying, very much satisfying, because I'm no longer just reading the chart and they're gone. I work with people minimum of 3 to 4 times. I can affect their life, and they are, that's just completely gratifying.
Right.
And I also take the element probably much further because I do a lot of spiritual hypnosis. And that inclines me to be working with people and their higher selves, which automatically just shifts me right into my higher self.
Right.
So they get done, and I'm just as whacked out as they are when we're all done. And it's taken me and given me all that spiritual energy,
right?
Which is it's a profound effect.
Okay, so I have a question for you. My ex-wife went to a hypnotherapist. And she went there to deal with smoking and her weight issue.
Okay.
And the session lasted about 90 minutes. And the way she described it to me was there was more counseling just going on than just hypnotherapy. She asked about the hypnotherapist asked about her father and relationship to father. This is on the first session. Is this normal or?
Well, you got to have a little cognitive work. I mean, he's got some hardwiring or cognitive disassociation with the problem.
Right.
You've got to get to what is the real question.
Right.
And then you got to get to the real pattern behind it.
Right.
And most people, I think it was Albert Schweitzer or somebody like that said, the problem with man is he doesn't answer the right question.
Right.
We can all get the right answers. They're all within. And so when I work with people, I want to get enough clarity enough to where they're at so that I know psychologically that when I go in to do the hypnotherapy, I know exactly where to go to get their question answered.
Interesting.
And then they can answer it for themselves.
Right.
So that's self-empowerment.
Right.
And all I'm in is a guide.
Well, she went there for weight loss and smoking. And then she comes home and says, do you want to have a baby? And I thought, well, yeah, Theoretically, sure. And she's like, no, right now. I'm like, well, okay.
You could go there once a week?
Well, no, but here's the trippy part about it, right? I mean, so we go to have the baby, and all of a sudden, this vortex opens in this room,
mm-hmm.
and our son is coming in.
Mm-hmm.
And it wouldn't have happened had she not gone to that hypnotherapist where she went to go have this weight and smoking thing, but it opened up something else.
Sure.
Can you be
sure? You know, anytime that we have conflicts and challenges, especially if you're in weight loss, then you know that's not the issue. It's an emotional component.
Right.
Same thing with smoking. The reason that you're smoking is because it's satisfying something that's empty, and usually it's boredom or anxiety or something like that. So anytime that you go into hypnosis, you're certainly going to start inquiring about that. Now, when you get them into hypnosis is a natural trance state that everybody goes through all day long.
Right.
Well, that gets you in alignment with going to hypnosis. So what you're doing is you're actually getting into that dimension to where you're much more horizontally aligned.
Right.
And so, you know, there can be some eroticism to a hypnosis session.
I'm not sure it was eroticism. It was more like unlocking the key to be able to have a
that's
child.
Right, because you're really unlocking the key of frustration. When you get in, it takes, every single weight loss has frustration and emotional components behind it.
Right.
And once you clear some of that up, or you get a little clarity in your mind about why you're overeating or why you're using a food as a substitute for an emotional something that's not fulfilling.
Right.
Well, once you get that clarity, well, then it's like that's a big uplift.
Yeah. So you're a pretty powerful, intense guy, insightful. What do you do for fun?
Oh, man, I had so much fun when I was young. Oh, I guess I do a lot of things. I mean, my wife and I, we like to do a little travel, and just living with her is fun because I get to talk to somebody about what I do, and she gets to talk to somebody about what she does. We like to take day trips, ride for hours and hours, and you know, I like to dine. I don't like to eat. I like to dine. I think life's too short to drink cheap wine, and
right.
So I just I'm enjoying this stage of my life. I like being smart and mature for a change.
Right. All right. I think the big burning question that is really on people's minds is, when did you become Marvin?
I became Marvin when I moved away from my hometown.
Okay.
You're never a hero when you're in your own home.
Right.
And when I moved away from here and I went to Phoenix and I left the past, I said, I'm no longer Butch.
Right.
I'm Marvin. That's my name. That's who I am. And I would say, that was the time that really started my growth and maturation. Coming together with her wasn't the easiest thing in my life, but it was the smartest, most manly thing that I've ever done in my life.
Mm-hmm.
And being able to go through that process and then achieving my dreams and goals of being successful out in the corporate world was a huge deal.
Right.
So that now you can let down, I do have merit. I am capable of accomplishing things, whether I was recognized or not prior.
Right.
So now I'm much more, I take things very spiritually. I take them in the moment.
Right. Good. What's your plans after the conference? Are you going anywhere else, or any speaking, going back to Nashville, plugging back into work?
No, I'll go back to Nashville and plug back into work. I mean, when you talk about what do you do for fun, I think what I'm doing is fun.
Right, yeah.
I mean, working with people that come in and they've got major issues and I can make a difference in their life. I've give up golf. I've give up everything. I mean, that's more of a delight in my life than anything else.
Beautiful. So we have Astro Marv, that's your astrology site, and you have a hypnotherapy site as well. Is that right?
Yeah, that's blhypnosis.com.
Okay, blhypnosis.com. Marvin, thank you.
You're very welcome. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, Marvin Wilkerson, give it up. So here we are, live at the center of the universe in Virginia Beach. This is Robert Phoenix listening to 11th House Radio Special Edition. It is half past the hour, and we're going to talk some more. We're going to bring somebody else up. Linda Bress, come on up here. Come on. So this is Linda Bress. She is the president of For Purpose, Inc., and she is a very integral person. You do a lot of stuff. You wear a lot of hats. You put the newsletter together, run the website, focalize the conference. There's a lot going on here. Thank you for coming on.
Thank you.
And thank you for inviting me. I know I had to go through certain channels, and you were probably one of those channels, so I appreciate that. What's your relationship with this? Let's talk about your relationship to the group, how you got into this, and also, kind of where it is. Where is this very dedicated group of people that come together once a year, and where is it headed? So let's go back to the roots and how you got into this.
The same person that Marvin was introduced to Buzz, I was introduced through Vicki Green. She was the connecting force in putting For Purpose together through Buzz. And so Vicki invited me to a Roots workshop that Buzz did, and I was hooked.
Mm-hmm.
And the creation of For Purpose, and I don't think it was called For Purpose at the time, but it was On Time Community, and that's how it started.
Yeah.
And there was a little history before then when Buzz was in Cleveland. He was in Cleveland.
Right.
And it was connected with the bridge.
Mm-hmm.
But he came down to Virginia Beach and lived here for a little while. And it started with me then. I fell in love with the organization, and it just was a love.
Mm-hmm.
And I began to come to the conferences and follow them. That one year it was in Florida.
Mm-hmm.
And I think for the rest of the time it's been here at the beach.
Mm-hmm.
But it's been something that was I called it a renewal of my soul every year.
Right.
And then as the group became together, and we had a board of directors, which sometime in the future I became part of. But it had its original board of directors.
So were you interested in astrology? Was that what brought you to this experience?
I would say it's part of it.
Right.
But I've been into astrology or interested in it my whole life.
Uh-huh.
And so it was one of the things. But I would say Buzz was the integral interest.
Sure. Your interest in Buzz.
Right, and what he had to say,
right.
How he said it, and the excitement that he brought with the phases and how to work with the phases,
right.
And what it did,
right.
How it changed my life.
Now, Buzz, he wasn't all about astrology. He would get into things like the medicine wheel and I am and angels, and he'd bring something back, and you guys would begin to work on those things, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So he was always exploring and trying to find new things to connect him. How did he deal with power, personal power? Was he responsible, and did he handle it okay? Or because it's always a hard thing when somebody becomes a leader of a group. It's a lot of energy to handle.
Yeah.
And I think all leaders have a challenge around that at some point.
he talked about a zero chief.
Mm-hmm.
He did not really want one person to be all powerful.
Yeah.
So that's why he called it, I think, a board of directors.
Uh-huh.
And there was a president and, a board that took care of the business part of it. And there were wheels that kind of spun off from that,
mm-hmm.
Because of the medicine wheel and the way it was set up.
Mm-hmm.
So, we worked with the wheel.
Mm-hmm. I see. Well, here we are 22 years later, and there is a sense with the group that it needs to transform, that it needs to be able to grow and expand. Can you talk about that and kind of where that's at and what you foresee as perhaps the direction of carrying on Buzz's work and evolving and growing?
Yes. Well, this is our third time around the wheel. So
Okay.
We are going around the spiritual part, and we are in disseminating.
Mm-hmm.
And we have been talking about some of the changes that we need to make in order to pull in more interested people, because there is definitely a need out there for change.
Mm-hmm.
People are restless and they're not happy with whether it's themselves or what's going on in their life or what's going on in their community or their government or whatever.
Right.
And it does, understanding yourself and being able to work through some of your own stuff to get to be able to step out.
Right. So disseminating means you're at a phase where you're sharing the information. So let's say somebody's listening to this broadcast and they hear what you have to say, or they hear what Marvin had to say, and they, well, this is kind of interesting. Maybe I'll check them out. They go to the website. What's their experience going to be like? What are they going to learn? How would they say, hey, I want to get involved. I want to know more about this. What would that look like?
Well, we have a website,
right.
And we're on Facebook, and you can email us.
Mm-hmm.
We have a conference every year,
mm-hmm.
and we are looking to create something new and more exciting. But I would say that if you want to find out more about it, that the way to go is to go on our website and learn a little bit more about our organization and what we do.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that Buzz wanted to create in at our conference was a place where you could feel unconditional love,
mm-hmm.
where you were not judged in any way,
right.
And that he understood that even as personalities get together, that they still have things to work out. And if you butted heads with somebody, it was because you were working out something else, maybe with somebody in your other family, but he let you work it out. He
mm-hmm.
didn't get involved in
right.
trying to be a parent and trying to work it out for you.
Right. That's actually pretty wise, huh?
Yeah. So you grew up working with the wheel so that you could work out your stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. We've got this whole generation of Pluto and Scorpio kids. I think this would be a natural fit for them based on all the Scorpio work.
Yes.
I think you got to find them, let them know, and they have to find you. I think this would be perfect for them because it would give their deep Plutonian and Scorpionic need for magic and power and transformation. It would give them a real template, some real tools, and I think so. Me personally, I think they're your target audience. They're your next generation.
We've been working with some young people, and they've been bringing in, some of their friends.
Right.
And we have some young people that have walked this wheel and actually come in with their parents
mm-hmm.
or their parent, and has grown tremendously.
Right.
And has. She was on the wheel the last couple of years, one of our facilitators.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And we have seen her grow, from a wild kid to a fabulous adult.
Right. That's wonderful. And I think that there is a real energy here, and that people could tap into it and benefit, grow from it, and lots of support. And again, I'm blown away. I mean, maybe I shouldn't be blown away, because the Scorpio energy is like really profound. Everybody I run into here, Pluto on the ascendant, Pluto first house, Mars in Scorpio moon. I mean, there's a magnet. And I have a Scorpio ascendant, so I wound up here. I must be in the right place.
Well, they say that you're never not in the right place for any particular reason, but the reason that you need to be here.
Right. Plans for the future?
We are planning to move forward.
Mm-hmm.
And we have a community that we have a meeting. We have a community meeting, and we look forward to discussing with the community our plans for the future.
Right.
And with that, we plan on making some changes, but we look forward to being here to continue.
Great.
Whether it's with young people or old people or all of the above.
Right. Absolutely. Before we transition and briefly say goodbye here, talk about the symbol for the group.
Pluto Jupiter.
Yeah.
The person that did the Pluto Jupiter symbol was Johnny Ruth Kuhn, who is one of our major beginning people who was here at the beginning.
Right.
And she's a fabulous artist, and Spirit brought it to her, and she brought it to us.
Right.
And that's been our symbol.
It's a great symbol. Really great symbol. Well, thank you for
You're welcome.
Being up here, sharing some history.
Okay.
I'm really enjoying my time. So,
well, great. We've enjoyed having you.
We see you around here, right?
Yeah.
Linda Bress, President. Okay, so what I think I'm going to do is I think I'm going to play a little bit of music, give you a chance to get up and walk around and have something to drink, whatever. We come back, we'll bring on another guest. We'll go a little bit deeper here at the For Purpose Inc. conference in Virginia Beach. Let's see, what do we want to play here? How about, since we're right by the ocean, right, why don't we play Great Big Water? This is Great Big Water by Alma Deathnuda. We'll be back in 5 minutes and 5 seconds. You're listening to the 11th House, and I'm Robert Phoenix.
I used to stumble around and I'd wonder why, questioning the moon, the stars, the sky. And then I saw the truth, all this pain was just in my head. I thought I better stop living, 'cause soon I just might be dead. And oh, a great big water flooded me. I became just another drop in the big gigantic sea. And through all this pain, confusion, I did slip, and my soul felt louder, so I thought I'd write this funky ass riff. The next step, oh well, I took it logically, was to share my thoughts, my life philosophy. But not all of the people wanted me to speak. They wanted the safety and the comfort of their negativity. And then I read the words of Mr. Gandhi. Be the change in the world you want to see. And so I closed my mouth and I tried to live the truth. And so it was a whole lot harder than preaching from a preacher's booth. Oh, a great big water flooded me. True, we might be drops, but we rip to infinity. And if ever you should forget this and start to trip, just listen to this message while we drop our funky riff.
We're back live from Virginia Beach, home of Edgar Cayce, and present home to the For Purpose Inc. conference. And we're going to bring on another integral member of this community. He's been, in some ways, the heartbeat, literally, every morning with his drum. Wolf Yaxel, we're going to bring him up here in a second. And the first morning I was here, I heard that drum. It was like, okay, I think I need to get down there now. And there he was, pounding away on this big, marvelous drum. So here he is, Wolf Yaxel.
Hi. All right.
So thank you for coming on up.
No problem.
And thank you for being here. What kind of drum is that?
It would be, a lot of people would be familiar with.
Come closer. Yeah.
A lot of people would be familiar with it as like a powwow drum.
Right.
But it's also, the large type of drum that it is used in all the larger ceremonies like the sun dances and the grass dances and different ceremonies that the native people would be doing. So this one is specific to ceremonial use. Right. So it's been in sun dances and thunder lodges and it's actually been sleeping for the last 5 years. So
you brought it out?
So it's time to wake it back up.
Did you have to season or heat the skin up or do anything special before you started to work with it again?
Yeah, so it's not a matter of, so the drum was made probably 17 to 20 years ago now.
Right.
Myself and a couple other people in my community at the time built it. There's a ritual when you build a drum that it has its own spirit. It has its own soul. And so when you put a drum together, there's a ceremony that you awaken the spirit. So you set it up so that it hits, you don't play it until it hits the first rays of sunlight after it's been made. So you set it somewhere or catch the first rising sun. That awakens its spirit. And then you do a little ritual when you put a drum to sleep, and you're not going to use it for a while, of saying goodnight to it, sort of thing. And then, so when I took it back out, I had to do another little ceremony, just a short one under the sun, at the sunrise, to sort of awaken and say, oh, come on, we're going on the road again. So, and so here it is.
And here it is. And here you are. When I first saw you, I said to myself, this is an interesting guy. He must have an interesting story about how he got here. And last night, you and I connected briefly in the hallway, and you shared some of that with me. The people in this room might know it. Maybe some don't. Certainly, very few people in that room don't know it. So let's go back in time, and let's kind of retrace your medicine path and its beginnings and origins, and kind of move forward into the future a little bit.
Okay. So I grew up in Western Canada, was born in Calgary, Alberta. And had kind of a normal life up until I was 14. I was a gymnast. Was in a gymnastic on my back. Was told I wouldn't walk again. Was in hospital for 3 months before they finally decided to do a spinal fusion. They told I had lost my use of my bladder and my legs, and a couple of specialists came in and said they thought they could fuse it and get all the bone chips. I had a bunch of broken bone chips that were pinching all the nerves. And so they went ahead with the surgery. I was in a body cast for 6 months. I learned how to go to the bathroom and how to walk again after a period of a year. It took about a year, physical therapy and all that kind of stuff. The one thing that I learned while I was there is how to push a morphine pump, which transferred into, long-term, transferred into a drug problem as I got back on the street.
Right.
So that went really crazy for about 3 years, and I was watching a program. I had a really bad trip, and I was watching a program the next morning. I'm trying to figure out what was going on with my life on the Northwest Territories.
And how old are you at this time? You're
at that time I was about 16 and a half.
16 and a half, and you've got a morphine drug problem that you
it went from that to LSD. I was trying to find God back then.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
you're 17 years old and you see something about the Yukon.
Actually, the Northwest Territories. Territories next to it.
Okay.
And so I decided that I was going to run away because all my problems were in Calgary and my family and all that sort of stuff, not outside of me. And so I planned that by, like selling my car and stealing money from my job and stealing money from my parents and buying snowshoes and a rifle and a backpack and a great big bag of pot seeds because I thought I could grow marijuana, and not realizing that the Yukon Territories, has 40 below weather. So pot doesn't grow very well in 40 below weather. Talked a friend into going. We got on a bus. We made it as far as north of Edmonton, Alberta, a little town called Fox Creek. It was 21 degrees outside. We were camped outside. He frostbit his feet that night, so I helped him back in, and he said, I'm out of here. This is it. He went back home, and I had gotten so, separated from my family and so many other issues that I was like, I can't leave.
There was no turning back.
There was no turning back.
Right.
So I got a job changing truck tires on the side of the highway for a trucking company. And one night, and I was there for, 3-4 months maybe, trying to figure out where I was really going at that point. And one night I was in a bar, and this guy, hippie-looking guy next to me, I was talking to him, and we were sitting there, and I was explaining that I wanted to get to the Northwest Territories. And he said, well, his name was Ted Abbott. And he said, come to the Yukon Territories. Come to a little town called Carcross, which means caribou crossing. I'll show you around. You'll have somebody to know up there. And so when I got up there, so I did. I worked a while later, and I managed to get myself up there, and I got to this little town called Carcross, and nobody knew Ted Abbott. So I still don't know who Ted Abbott is. He's still wandering out there somewhere.
Do you think he really existed?
I question that sometimes today.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I was up there for a while and ran out of money, pawned my rifle, didn't know anybody, was living in a little cabin off in the side of the woods that somebody had pointed out. And I was talking to, there's a little hotel, and I was talking to the manager of the hotel and said, I got to find, is there any work? Is there anything? And he said, well, I heard about this guy, native guy that has some horses out on a lake that needs somebody to take care of them over the winter. And do you know anything about horses? And I said, yeah, I do. Which, as a good street manipulative kid,
right.
I didn't.
Right.
So I ended up making the phone calls and meeting this guy by the name of Jack Thunderwolf Johnson, who was a Cowichan medicine man at the time. And what we ended up doing was going out to this place on this lake that was 75 miles on a dirt road in the middle of nowhere. There was half a dozen horses, an old log barn, and a trailer. And I spent the day with him, and he said, well, I'll tell you what, I will teach you everything that I know, and I didn't know what that meant at the time. I thought, like, taking care of horses. And he said, in one condition, and I said, what's that? He said, you never bullshit me again, because nothing that ever has come out of your mouth has been a piece of truth at all. He just, like, saw right through me. And so he set me up, and with a box of food and some blankets and a key to the place, and gave me some rules and regulations and some little jobs to do, and drove down the road. And I fell apart.
You fell apart.
I fell apart. Nice. And cried for about 3 days, I think.
What the hell am I doing here?
Yeah. You know, I didn't know anything about the wilderness. So then, you know, a few days later, he drove back in, some more food, and we started working together. And he taught me how to hunt and trap and build log cabins and live off the land and herbs and fish and also about sitting under a pine tree when you had to figure yourself out. Every single time that I would be upset or something, there was an old, big, huge spruce tree, and he'd say, go sit under the tree. And so over the years, because I was with him for almost 6 years, over the years, I cried under the tree, I kicked the tree, I punched the tree, never hit me back. I swore at the tree, I dug holes in the ground. I mean, I have this huge relationship with this tree in learning how to sit with myself.
Right.
And that was a big part of my recovery. The first couple times that I went to town, which was Whitehorse, I immediately went to a bar and got really drunk, and he would find me and take me back out and sit me back under the tree. And as time went on, I found out that he was a Native American shaman or medicine man, and had a son that didn't want to learn it,
right,
and needed to pass some of the information on at the time,
right,
and that he'd had a dream 2 years later. He had told me that he had a dream I was coming, and so he started teaching me, besides all the things about just living on the land, he also started teaching me about listening to the land and listening that everything had a spirit and everything was alive.
Right.
And his wife was a lady named Dorothy, and I was with him for about 6 years, and they both passed. He had a heart problem and actually died on an operating table.
Right. And were you there in that area when that happened?
I was in the area. Him and Dorothy went to Vancouver, which was where his son was living outside, and they went to a big hospital. He had open heart surgery and died on the operating table. And Dorothy, who my adopted mother, and I'll share a little bit about that. My adopted mother flew back, and one of the things that she said, which was really weird, when I talked to her on the phone, she wasn't a very talkative person. All she could say is, the white man took his heart out and he died. Well, I didn't know anything about open heart surgery, but somehow she found out that, and they had put her in some kind of observation deck or something. But
right.
And probably because she had never really been out of the Yukon, she actually saw the surgeon sort of open Jack's chest and kind of take the heart out. And all she knew is he died because they stole his heart.
Right.
So she came back. I got her off the plane. She lived for about 6.5 months. I kind of took care of her. She just sat and didn't talk very much after that. I went to wake her up one morning and she was gone.
Wow.
And just died in her sleep.
Wow.
And so that was sort of the end of that phase of my life. I kind of went around, and at that point, I'd reconnected with my biological family, stuff like that. They did. Jack did do a adoption ceremony, him and Dorothy adoption ceremony, which was part of the native tradition.
Right.
And adopted me as their son.
Wow.
And that's how I got the name Wolf.
Wow. So special connection with wolves? Are they a spirit animal, totem animal for you?
Yeah, I mean, I worked with them. I saw them a lot when I lived in the Yukon. I worked with them to some extent. So the wolf represents kind of the trailblazer, and that's kind of energy that I live. I'm kind of a visionary, and I've created a lot of sort of visions out there that have happened or are happening. But the main spirit animal I work with is a red hawk.
Red-tailed hawk.
So, yeah, that's my medicine.
I've had a few experiences with red-tailed hawks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there.
Those too. So that chapter of your life closes. It's got to be a big now what, or did you know what you were going to do after this?
No, I went back down to Vancouver Island, where my family had moved to at that point, and ended up connecting with some Native people there, but not just from a personal level. It's like all of a sudden there were Native people in my life. Just to get it on the record, I'm Scotch English.
Right.
I have no Native blood in me. This is a joke that God and I are going to talk about when we get, So I was on Vancouver Island for a while, and interesting enough, I ended up working at a summer camp called Camp Thunderbird out there, which was a Native kind of base camp for kids, and I started taking kids out in the wilderness because my background.
Right.
Out hiking one day, I met a lady on top of a mountain who was from Boston, and the next thing you know, I'm living in Boston.
Wow.
And I lived outside of Boston for 6 months and said, I absolutely hate this. There's no mountains. This is a big city. Find me some mountains. So we had a trip, and we ended up in Virginia. And the course of the time while in Virginia, I just kept running into things where there were some Native people. So the first thing was I was invited to a medicine wheel gathering by a man by the name of Sun Bear, which the medicine wheel here is actually based on. So I met Sun Bear, I met Wallace, I met another lady by the name of Twala Nitch, who was a Seneca grandmother elder. My wife and I lost our first son a little while, not very long after that. We had gone up to visit Twala once. We lost our son, and, we were grieving and everything, and Twala said, you need to come up here. So we packed it up, and we moved on the Seneca Indian Reservation. I lived with her for a year. Wallace, I got a funny story about
this is Wallace Black Elk?
Wallace Black Elk, yeah. His wife's name was Grace Spotted Eagle. We were at a gathering in Florida. I went down there with Twala. They were doing sweat lodges, and I was helping with the fire. And it was late at night, and I'd gone up to get something and down. And there was, along the trail, right outside one of the sweat lodges where Wallace was doing some ceremony, there was a rolled-up blanket kind of in the trail. So I kind of kicked it to get out of the way because I was walking. I had some coffee in my hand and everything, and the blanket went, oh! Well, come to find out it was Wallace's wife, Grace Spotted Eagle. That's not the way to meet your elders, by the way, is by kicking them. I sort of stumbled my way through meeting my elders. They all have kind of those kind of weird, funny stories. So I ran the fire, and I was like, oh, I'm really in trouble now. And after it was over, I get this messenger comes up and says, are you Wolf? And I said, yeah. And they said, come with me. So I go back up, and they say, Wallace wants to see you. And I'm like, okay. I kicked his wife. Now, if you knew Wallace Black Elk, he was like 6'4".
He's a big guy.
He was a big guy.
Yeah.
And so I'm panicked. And I go in the room, and he says, so I hear you have some skills with regards to your hands. I guess because he knew Twala, she had said something. With your hands, and I had done some healing work at that point a little bit. And he said, legs are cramping. Can you help me? So I worked on him, and for the next 5.5, 6 years, I was on the road with him.
Wow.
Off and on. So he became another elder of mine. So it was like one, and he introduced me to the Sundance and the Sweat Lodge, and so I was living on the Seneca Reservation. I was traveling with Wallace. I was traveling with Sun Bear too at the time.
Right.
Helping do gatherings and stuff like that.
We should do a sweat lodge on this beach.
Yeah.
I would love that.
Oh, did you? Yeah. So bumping it ahead a little bit just to kind of connect with some of the other elders. So my family is still in Canada. We did a trip one summer out to visit my family. We stopped off on the way back from Vancouver on the Blackfoot Reservation just in northern Montana. There was a powwow going on there, and all of a sudden during the powwow I had this image of the map of Montana and these red roads. You know the maps look, they have the red roads are little and the big roads are the highway.
Right.
So this map of these red roads, and I turned to my and I said, come on, we got to go drive it down a red road. Not realizing even that I had said red road, which is the path.
That's the path you're on. Yeah.
So we got on this red road and we kept driving, and I kept saying, I got to turn left here and I got to turn right here. And I had no idea where I was going. And the next thing I knew, I drove up into Sundance Arbor of a Sundance going on the Crow Reservation.
Wow.
And so knowing enough about ritual and ceremony, I was like, oh, let's stay here and let's pray. So you always offer gifts to elders.
Right.
So the dance wasn't going at the time. There was a young kid sitting in a chair near the gate of the arbor. And so I gathered stuff up, and I took these gifts, and I said, can we stay here and pray with you?
Right.
And he said, well, wait a minute, I'll go get my uncle. And I'm like, no, don't disturb me. Like, oh, no. And so he runs off into the arbor, and he comes back with this old gentleman, and he sits down in the chair, and I said, here's some gifts, and I really hope I can be here and pray with your people and pray for this. And he said, that would be good. And he got up to leave. Now, in the Sundance, you don't eat or drink for 3 or 4 days, depending on the length of time of the Sundance. And it was the second day of the dance, and I made the mistake of handing him a bag of cornmeal as one of the gifts. So he looked at me, and he held it up and went, thanks, I'll go make myself some corn muffins, and walked back in the arbor. That was Tom Yellowtail, who was the medicine man and Sundance chief of the Crow Nation.
Wow.
And he became my elder.
Wow.
So somehow I managed to stumble my way into having these...
The serendipitous path of meeting your elders. Can you list the traditions of the nations that have influenced your life directly?
So the Cowichan, the Lakota, the Crow, and then the Seneca.
Okay.
Those are the main.
Right.
Yeah.
And you've taken this work now into a very conscious healing space, and you work in an addiction center.
Right.
And so you're bringing your native wisdom, things you've learned, other things you've learned along the way, and you're helping people get clean, essentially.
Right.
And you're at a pretty big, fairly well-known place.
Yeah,
right?
It's Pavilion International down in North Carolina. It's one of the largest. It's one of the top 10 actually in the country.
Right.
And I'm the spiritual wellness director there now.
How many other people? Like, nobody's like you, okay? I kind of get that. But how many people are there like you that are employed in these recovery centers as the spiritual leader or chaplain? Is this unique?
No, actually it's not. And you would think it is.
Yeah.
If you know anything about the 12-step recovery program, it's a spiritually based program. And a lot of treatment programs do not have a spiritual care person that is targeted, or a department that's targeted at doing spiritual care and spiritual counseling, which is different than just guiding somebody along a path.
Right. Okay?
Because there's trauma involved. If you understand spiritual illness, people with addiction have spiritual illness and how to be able to work with that. I've been there for 5 years now, and as I was sort of trying to figure out, I was calling to other places and saying, you have a spiritual care, because I was trying to find colleagues. And they're like, well, we don't have a spiritual care department, and we don't have that. We have we have a counselor doing some grief work, or we have that kind of thing. So I realized that there was no professional organization for spiritual care departments in the country.
Right.
So I got on the phone and found the ones that did have spiritual care people. And we just had our first meeting. There were 6 of us in Chicago, and we just started the first professional spiritual care professional organization.
With 6 of you.
Six is the core.
Right.
When we're reaching out to other programs to.
And their traditions are similar, different than yours?
I'm the black sheep. They all have divinity degrees.
Okay.
You know.
Wow, interesting. So I bet you blow a few minds when people come through this center, because first of all, that would be the first word I would use to describe you as present. Second is real and grounded. So you're not coming off as being airy-fairy or inauthentic. So people are going to move into your space, and they're there for help. And then all of a sudden, you open up. And what happens to these people when they work with? What are some of the things they've seen?
So first of all, I try to do ritual. One of the things is that they've lost their connection to any kind of spirituality. Right. And so the first thing they do is start identifying and connecting with that. I guess I have a voice, and I know I have a voice, but my voice has some kind of resonance or something, because I have people like will come into my office and say they'll either just want to sit in my office and do nothing and just be there, or sometimes they'll come in and say, "Can we talk?" And I'll start talking, and I have no idea where we're going.
Right.
And then they'll say, "Well, I just want it to hear you talk."
Right.
And that seems to sometimes change people's lives just doing that. But I do a lot of ritual work. I do a lot of ritual work around trauma. I do a lot of ritual work, and because in the native culture, your spirit is sick first,
right,
and then everything comes from that.
Right.
Not that you're physically sick or emotionally sick, and then somewhere along the way you figure out that your spirit's got some issues.
Right.
So I come from a place where I try to help them understand and heal their soul to bring that back together, and out of that becomes their recovery.
Right. Everybody's got their story around what brought them there and what their symptoms are. But if you could sort of condense and concentrate your relationship with addiction and everything that's kind of associated with it, what would you characterize as being the shadow or the portal for this for people? What is the main theme, or what is the addiction of our times, Wolf? What are we dealing with when you work with people in the center?
The addictions of our times is that the level of trauma and stress and lack of compassion and love in our world causes people to crack and break, and they reach out to try to heal that. We also live in a society that teaches us not to feel. If you look, and I actually did this. I watched an hour of TV one time trying to figure this out. I saw 5 commercials for drug companies saying, if you take this, you don't have to feel that.
Right.
And then I saw 2 commercials for law groups saying, if you take that, we'll sue them. But the reason that we have feelings, whether it's physical or emotional, is to tell us something is wrong.
Right.
And to begin to work to try to heal that. That's why we have those things. That's why God gave us those. And what we've done is we created a society that's separate from each other. We don't Facebook, texting, all that. We don't really communicate. I love going to a restaurant and watching how many people sit across the table and are on their cell phones and never have a conversation.
Right.
So we don't connect. We don't let ourselves feel, because feeling isn't good anymore.
Yeah.
And so, and out of that, and because there's no compassion, I had a really wonderful opportunity to spend 6 days in a kind of a small group with the Dalai Lama.
Right.
And what ended up happening there was his main thing was about compassion, that we need to have compassion in the world. And I think without what this group brings, where we all feel loved and we hug each other, and people walk away feeling like they have community. We don't have community. We don't have rites of passage.
Right.
We don't have community. I mean, all the things that hold a so-called tribe together, we don't have any. We don't have it in our society.
Right.
And people are in pain because of that.
Yeah. Yeah. I know from where I came from in California, and perhaps in other parts of the United States, there was a big interest in taking ayahuasca medicine journeys. And I saw people do this in a way that was fairly responsible. And I saw other people who were using this as yet another addiction. What's your opinion of ayahuasca and these traditions, these newer, or they're old traditions, but they've become very popular here in the United States and the world over in the last 10 years. What's your feeling about this?
So, first of all, it's important to understand that native cultures around the world have used some kind of substance to get you into that other world. But it's usually done by a trained medicine person or shaman. You prepare for a long period of time before you go there. The idea of taking something, anytime you go into the spirit world, there's a possibility of getting part of you lost in there,
right,
especially with a substance. So you go there, if you don't have somebody who can get you out of there, in psychological terms, it's called a psychic break or a psychotic break.
Mm-hmm.
They get a psychotic break and they don't find their way back. In medicine terms, their spirit's lost out there. So there's always that hazard. Second of all, it takes a lot of preparation to be able to prepare for any kind of ritual at that intensity. Even the Sundance, which I'm a Sundancer, I did Sundance for a number of years, took a year of very intense preparation.
You just don't show up for a Sundance.
Well, lots of people do, and they're hurt by it.
Yeah.
You know, they end up struggling for the year, and they don't understand why. A Sundance is designed to empower whatever's going on in your life.
This is the dance where they cord on the flesh and you have to break away from the pole.
So that's done with the Lakotas and the Cheyennes and a couple other ones. The Crow and the Arapaho do a Sundance where they don't pierce. So there's a couple of different, they're similar to that.
Okay.
So no food, no water, dancing your prayers,
right,
morning and night kind of thing. So when you take a substance, so there's a lot of people out there that, it's kind of like the native tradition in the 1980s when Sun Bear and Wallace and those people were teaching. It became a fad. Lots of people were out there doing it, and there was lots of people on the reservation that were in poverty.
Mm-hmm.
And they went, wow, some white guy is going to pay $200 or $300 to climb in a sweat lodge. Well, I've been doing that all my life. I can go out there and run a sweat lodge. They weren't trained to run a sweat lodge, but who cared? Because they were going to get rich and they were going to be paid because of the poverty that they had. So lots of people were hurt in the course of being involved in sweat lodges. It became a fad for a long time.
Right.
Everybody was doing sweat lodges. And 3 years ago, there was a guy that wasn't trained properly in Arizona that killed 3 people.
That's right.
So there's an example. So now you have the ayahuasca South American stuff. Yes, there are some shamans trained. I also know there are large groups that have found some shaman that's a poor person, and by those people sort of manipulating that person, they're like, okay, well, let's make this a money-making business. It's a money-making business,
right,
and it's a fad.
Yeah.
I'm actually working with a number of people right now, and I have to be careful because of confidentiality, but I'm working with a number of people and have in the last couple of months that actually had an addiction, were told that by taking ayahuasca that they would be able to resolve their addiction. There was a spirit sickness. Went down there and were in recovery at the time, not in their blown addiction. We're actually in recovery. Thought that they could just wipe the slate clean using that ceremony and went back into their addiction. Threw them back into their addiction. Now they're in treatment with us.
Wow.
And the term that I use is when you use a substance and it's not done in the really, really right way and you haven't done all the preparation, you're having a vision of looking at the ocean through those windows,
mm-hmm,
versus standing in the ocean, which is a real vision. And that can be done without any substances.
Yeah.
You do have to, fasting and stuff like that helps.
Right.
But you have to somebody guide it that really knows what they're doing.
Right.
So
do you lead groups on your own apart from your work with the the recovery center?
I do somewhat. I do a few more. So I have a sweat lodge in my backyard. I do more what we call doctoring or healing ceremonies with people individually.
Yeah.
I had a spiritual center for 16 years here, actually in the mountains of Virginia, and for various political and just I needed to back off. But we had a huge community of like 1,200, 1,500 people from around the world that came and participated in ceremonies and stuff. And it's funny because you were talking about the young people earlier, and in talking with this group, I've talked about we need to get the young people. I just talked to somebody in this group individually about them working with young people, and I just met a friend from our community that was talking about our kids and how our kids are now reaching out and wanting community and wanting this.
Right.
So there's a real need and a real want. The only difference that we've got to be careful with, I think, in working with the young kids is that the young people that have come in to this time period are way ahead of us, you know, and they're running much faster, and so it takes a lot to get them in the right. So if we're stuck in the old and we're trying to help the young people, we're going to say, we don't want anything to do with you.
Right.
You know?
Right. So you have to reevaluate what you're doing.
Right.
And bring something tangible and got some juice.
Yeah.
Right. These people.
So I don't know, 5 or 6 years ago, there was another gentleman that came out here who is a musician, didgeridoo player, flute player by the name of John Dumas, who now lives in Hawaii. Right. And so
they're doing that just for us, by the way. Yeah. You know that, right?
Yeah, they're flying over. They're after the UFO. So one of the things that John had come out to my center and had done some ceremony with me. And so what we ended up doing is he called me and said, one of my other medicines is thunder. So that's what that is in the background. Right. So one of the things, he called me up and said, listen, I'm doing, hanging out with this group and I'm doing this. Can you come down and hang out with me and do some things? And so I came down and I met everybody, which was really ironic because him and I met at another program called Life Spectrums years ago, and which was another group that got together and we were working on spirituality, I think, more like in the 80s. I just in time with that. But and so as I got to start to look around the circle and meet, I realized that there were half a dozen people from Life Spectrums that I had met that were now in this group. Interesting. And so John went off and I stayed on.
Mm-hmm. So it's been 5 years.
Yeah.
And you're the sort of the shamanic facilitator for the group. What is your connection to astrology, if any at all? Does that interest you? Do you make any kind of bridge between what you're doing and their work? How's that worked out for you or evolved?
Well, when it comes to the sky, there's stars. And a moon. Right. Okay. So, I mean, the moon has a certain energy that native people work with, but not from an astrological side. I don't really know much about it. I have a little bit of a fascination. I had somebody from this group 3 or 4 years ago offer to do my chart, and I was real excited. She put a lot of work into it, made tapes, and we talked on the phone for like 4 hours, and she did my reading, and I was like, wow, that's incredible. And she wrote a whole bunch of stuff and sent it to me, and I looked at it and I put it in a drawer. And then I remembered a year later, and I took it out, and I looked at it again, and I went, wow, look at that. All that stuff happened, and I put it in the drawer. And then 8 months later, I took it out and went, oh, look at it, it's still happening. I put it in the drawer. That's sort of I don't know much about astrology. I know it's really old. I know that it works. There are some things when you had talked the other night, I thought that was about what's happening in the world. I think those are really good. But to me, the reality is that living in the now and understanding that we are connected, there's a spirit world around us, and that magic and spirituality is happening all the time, that we don't necessarily need to know what's going on down there if we're paying attention to what spirits are guiding us, because we're going to be told and guide it to where we need to go.
Right.
So
right. Got it.
When we're connected, we are. When we're not connected, that's when we're stumbling.
Right.
So
exactly. Anything else you want to share with the great big World Wide Web out there? Any words of wisdom or any insight in the times we're living in besides how it relates to addiction?
Well, so just what I said. There is only now. Okay, you can't go back and fix the past, and the future is not here yet.
Right.
So if you can focus on what's going on with your life right now, then that's what you're going to get more out of it.
Right.
And that's people that are searching for spirituality. There's a couple of different things. One, spirituality is happening all the time. It's the awareness that spirituality is happening. God, your higher power, the Tao, the universal force, the force out of Star Wars, whatever term you want to use, quantum physics, it's happening right now. If you're aware of that and allow yourself to trust that, your life will go smoothly.
Right.
If you fight it or you're not aware of it or not paying attention or stuck in the past or in the present, your life is you're going to stumble through life.
Yeah.
And, and everything, and the other big piece that people, I think, and I told this group the other day, that if you believe that whatever your belief system is created the ocean and the waterfalls and all of that, and and I've never heard anybody sit next to a beautiful waterfall or a flower garden or under an ancient tree or by the ocean and go, wow, that really sucked. You usually say, oh, I had a calming spiritual experience, that's really a centered place for me. All that, whatever created all that created you and all these people in the room and all these people listening. And so we need to learn that when we are having a conversation with another human being, we're also looking into God's eyes.
Interesting. Yeah. Great.
So,
thank you very much.
Thanks.
It's been great looking. How do you say your last name again?
Yoxel.
Yoxel. Is that Toltec or what is
that? Actually is an old. So there's a town called Yoxel in England.
Okay.
But originally before 1060, when all the names were Anglo-Saxonized, my family was from the northern England and stuff, and it was called Lochshale. Which was a very Scottish word.
It looks the spelling looks Toltec. It's unusual.
Yeah. It means the center where two rivers come together.
Interesting.
Yeah. Wow. So it also means once it got Anglo-Saxonized. So because they were farmers, so it's where two rivers came together, and then when it got Anglo-Saxonized, it got changed to, and because they're all farmers, to the yoke of an ox. So you can take that. If you get to know me, you can take that whichever way you want.
Right. All right, Wolf Yoxel, give it up. Thank you very much. Okay, we've got about 28 minutes left here. I'm going to play a little piece of music, a little shamanic music, because we just had the medicine man of the group spend some time with us. So, of course, I'm going to play some Jorge Reyes, Sendero. Let me see. Where it is. Hold on. Where's Jorge? Jorge. I will find it here. It's not there. I hate this dead air time when I scroll through everything trying to find the one piece of music that I'm looking for, but I will find it. I think what we're going to do is we're going to play the music, and when we come back, we're going to talk to, I think Linda Coleman's going to come up here, because I've heard she's very articulate and has some good things to say. We'll maybe find out more about this group and kind of the spiritual life of the group and where it's come from and where it's been. All right, so I'm going to ditch Jorge. Here's Sundari. I'll be back in 4 minutes and 38 seconds. This is Robert Phoenix. You're listening to a special edition of 11th House Radio. That was Sundari, and we're back. We're back here live at For Purpose Inc.'s incubation period for 7 days, and we're gonna have a few people come up here. Come on, Johnny. Come on.
Hi.
So I'm sitting next to Blessed Goddess Energy right here, and with great senses of humor, Linda Coleman. Right?
Hello.
Have you been on the radio before?
No.
Okay. First, certainly. And Johnny Ruth, welcome.
Hi.
Yes, welcome.
Thank you.
Have you been on the radio before?
No.
All right. It's the first for you guys.
Mm.
All right. So let's talk. Let's get down here. How long have you been a part of the group?
Mm-hmm. Since the inception, and the 6 years before that at Hilton Head when it was called the Bridge.
The Bridge.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And you had an interest in spirituality, obviously, right? I mean, this is what brought you in. And what's your family think about all this? Are they supportive? Are they following you on this journey along with you? Are they side by side, or like, well, let's let them go and go do their thing? What's that been like?
My family?
Yeah.
I am what my mother was, okay? So
Yeah.
It's the same thing. Very spiritual, very understanding, very everything.
Right.
And then there's my father. That's another story.
Yeah.
So, no, and I have 2 sons, and they're very much like myself. And they came to the first bridge in Hilton Head.
Right.
They were the youngest ones there, 17 and 21.
Yeah.
And everybody said, well, why do you have your sons here? No, and I said, well, because they're even much more so than I am, and why should they wait until they're in their 40s?
Right.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. We had a little conversation about that yesterday. What was your mom like? I mean, what kind of spiritual path was she walking? And yeah.
She was a natural one. She was just a wonderful, talented, beautiful, wonderful woman.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. Right. Linda, what about you?
My background is Pentecostal holiness. I grew up in North Carolina, raised by my grandmother, a lot of rights and wrongs. And eventually, when I had a child, I started reading and thinking and discovering Eastern philosophy.
Right.
And got my first reading, which I didn't even know there was such a thing,
right.
in 1979. And found a group of people that developed my understanding in universal laws to some degree. And my interest in astrology has been strong because it was the first thing I was ever exposed to.
Right.
And I met Buzz in Richmond, Virginia, and he was doing astrology workshops for us. And his information was phenomenal, and his personality for me was difficult at the time. So I sort of backed off. And then he started this community in 93 when the Uranus-Neptune conjunction was together.
Mm-hmm.
And I came to see what that was about and what he was about at the time. And it was like a blessing. I met my spiritual family. He was totally matured and loving and open. And the group that he had attracted was like a sacred space. And it's just been a place that every year I gift to myself to keep myself on target. And my son started coming, and he's a facilitator, and my grandson now has been coming since he was 2. He comes on the weekends. He's 15. So I never thought that I would have a connection to spirituality with, my son and my grandson. I have another son in Colorado because of where I began, but it's been the extended family and my own unique family, and it's just held me together through many times. So It's a joy and a blessing.
How has this work changed your life?
Well, how it changed my life has been total, because it gave me tools and unconditional love that I never had for me to do the work I needed to do to clear my own belief systems and my own issues for myself.
Right.
And it stopped putting everything outside of me.
Right.
So I didn't have that understanding as a young person, even as a young mother.
Yeah.
I was late to the game.
Yeah.
So the support that the community has given and the space that they hold it gave me places to work out my own frustrations. And I met people that I didn't like, and yet we had a common vision. And I stayed in that space because of the vision and learned to love those people. Mm-hmm. And there's no one here that has ever come now that I don't feel really comfortable and loving and kind about.
Right.
And that wasn't true in the beginning for me. So I developed into a more of an unconditional loving person for myself and others.
So was it a little more, were you a little more closed off and trying to break through and break down some of your personal barriers?
I think in the beginning I was just more judgmental. There was a right and wrong about everything.
Yeah.
And I didn't understand the universal laws, or I didn't understand, that I was creating my world, or that my relationships were mirrors.
Yeah.
And so it was just I was living in the space that I was born into.
Right.
And I was making, the best lemonade I could make. I didn't have the ability and the tools to shift that until I came here.
Yeah.
So I really feel like it was, it wasn't an accident because I was searching, but it was a gift because of the quality of the people that I ran into. And Johnny Ruth being a strong part of that for me because she's so heart-centered and it's fun.
Mm-hmm.
There's no rules. It's like love and be kind.
Right.
And have a good time.
Have a good time.
Yeah.
What about you, Johnny Ruth? How's your life changed since you've been doing this?
Well, I consider this group my family. I have my 2 sons, but actually I don't have my parents. I don't have any siblings. I don't have any cousins. I don't have anybody. I have my 2 sons, and this is really my family, and I love them. And when it was first started at Hilton Head, I was divorced. I was divorced and had my 2 sons, and the father disappeared someplace in Costa Rica. And so that was a kind of a shock. But I thought for my son's sake, my only question about going to Hilton Head was when everything gets, you go into your groups, I wanted to know that there were at least 3 groups because I wanted them to each be separate from me in case they had any questions or any feelings that, because we were always very close, but sometimes you can express to a stranger what you can't to the person you love the most. So I wanted to know that there were at least 3 separate groups. Outside of that, I was a very happy person and very fortunate and with a wonderful husband at the time and had no financial problems. I had no health problems. I had no problems. I was very, very happy.
Right.
And so when I found out, I knew Buzz.
Yeah.
And so I thought this was a wonderful opportunity, though, to go to Hilton Head. I had never been to anything like this. I hadn't been to any classes. I hadn't been to anything. This was all just how I was kind of naturally.
Was he your astrologer? Did you have?
No.
Okay. All right.
No, I just knew him and went to a couple of talks.
Okay.
And I just always liked astrology from the time I was a teenager, and I was into healing and astrology and into everything kind of naturally.
Right.
And so anyhow, when I went, when I heard about it and everything, and I heard all these people that were going, they had all of these problems, and it was, I won't even tell you some of the things that they said, So, but I thought it's, it was really astounding to my brain and everything that they thought they had to unload and everything, and that they were going, this was a big group. It was 125 people, I think, the first year, because it was Dorothy Santangelo, who had her group from New York, and Buzz with his group that came from Cleveland. And so, and the 2 groups met. And anyhow, so with all of these people, and there were going to be, the 8 facilitators. And so I thought, and all these people are coming with all of these problems, and 8 people are supposed to take care of it. So I knew that my role, or I thought I knew my role, was to go as a battery charger.
Mm-hmm.
That was the message that I got.
Right.
And they needed a battery charger. They needed somebody who had a good sense of humor and didn't have any problems to add to the problems they were already listening to and everything. And so, and that's really the way it's kind of always been.
And you're the battery charger to this day. I can see that.
And I think that I was the battery charger. And it was called an intensive. We're not so much an intensive now, but that was an intensive. It started before 7 o'clock in the morning,
right.
And we were going until 3 o'clock in the morning.
Wow.
And, but you I never felt tired or anything. So I really was a battery charger, and I loved it. I loved the area. I loved the people. We were, just like right in there at Hilton Head, and nobody left. Nobody did anything. And it was wonderful, and it is still wonderful. And I felt that, for the people to leave there with a lighter heart and a better sense of humor and everything, and to take that feeling of wonderfulness and everything back to their communities wherever they were going. And we had them from California, from Germany, from here, from there, from Canada, from everywhere. And they took that feeling back to where they came from.
Right.
And Buzz at the time said, I think that everybody should go to something like this at least twice a year,
Mm-hmm.
And that's how I wound up going from that to Life Spectrums, which in Hilton Head it was in like the end of January, then Life Spectrums was in the middle of the year. So I had it every 6 months, and I had a wonderful husband who said, go, be good, do the best you can. And so, to go out the door with that kind of a push and a kiss and everything, and it was wonderful. And I still have that, and I consider this my extended family, and I love them, and I love being here, and that's how I feel.
Do you guys still do the phase work? Are you still working on that when you're not here and doing all the stuff that Buzz laid out for you? Is that an important part of your practice?
Well, I don't have a practice, and I'm not an astrologer.
Right.
So, and
but your spiritual practice.
Oh yes, right.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
And and I'm an ADL minister, and I just feel like you're ministering every day. We're all healers, and we're all being healed, and we're teachers, and we're learning and everything every day.
Yeah.
So this is how I live my life every day.
Yeah.
So.
Well, the thing that we do on a monthly basis is we have someone that coordinates all the emails for the group,
mm-hmm.
and we have a healing wheel.
Right.
And so anyone, whether they've ever come or not, can request to be on the healing wheel, and they're prayed for by members of the community, and you can volunteer to be someone that prays for people if you would choose to do that in whatever modality serves you.
And it's a very
best.
powerful healing.
Mm-hmm.
And we've had many good reports from that. So something that we connect with, you were asking how do people connect with us.
Right.
The healing wheel is our monthly, contact point that really sort of sustains us through the year, other than the meetings that we have in smaller groups.
So if people want to connect in, they can go to the website and say, hey, I want to be a part of this healing wheel.
Right.
And then all of a sudden now
follow the moon.
Yeah.
Nobody's mentioned that.
They do. Followthemoon.org.
Followthemoon.org. Okay. And that's a way for them to have an entry point into your larger circle.
Mm-hmm. And I wanted to mention something because my grandson has been coming here since he was 6 and he's 15. He comes on the weekend.
Yeah.
And they did a little video capture one year about why do you come?
Mm-hmm.
And he was young. And innocence speaks the truth.
Right.
And he said, I come because I want to be where people love me, and I'll come until the day I die.
Oh, wow.
So it's like the thing that we have is that in the midst of our joy or blessed life, or in the midst of our joy and difficulties, we know that there's love here waiting to be shared.
Right. And do any of you guys see each other outside of this place and connect?
We do.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Good.
And I live in Florida, so, I've been fortunate enough to be able to take off for here or there, or everybody likes to come to Florida.
Right. Well, you guys have made me feel incredibly welcome. So thank you for
we
being
just think
here.
It's a joy that we've had you for this week.
Yeah. It's been great. It's totally
You're a
great.
blessing to us,
Yeah.
really.
Well, you've been a blessing to me and a real kick, too. So, yeah. And I'm honest with you. I came here, I'm like, what am I doing here? It's like, okay. I had no idea what I was going to get into when I got here. This guy over there.
We've thanked Guy 100 times already.
And so I walk. I come. First of all, I'm hearing the drum, the dum. And I've done some native stuff. I've done sweat lodges. I've been part of group participants. So it's not like it's foreign to me, right? But I haven't done it in a long time. So I come down, and then there's Wolf banging the drum, and then there's Marvin, and then you guys are doing like this samba line out of the deck. And then you're dancing around. I'm like, and then Marvin's like, come on, get in here. I'm like, okay. And so I'm flapping my wings. And here I am. And then there was a string of violet lights running across the floor. I was like, I was in at that point. I'm like, okay, I don't know what this thing is about. I'm just going to surrender.
Well, one thing Buzz mentioned was when you come, go out to other areas, go out and learn and grow and bring something back to community to share.
Yeah.
So I think that we have a lot of opportunity with community here because so many people have traveled and done so many things on their own. So we have just many, many blessings from different areas, whether it be astrology or moon phase or Reiki or, all kinds of healing modalities, numerology, everything, tarot.
Yeah.
So it isn't a limited place. It's a place to come and be and develop yourself.
Well, I got that because the thing that I've experienced is the people that are here, they're sitting around, they're part of a talk, and next they're up out of their chair and they're doing something. And by the time I leave here, the majority of you will have done something as a part of this group, and it's very empowering. It's very empowering.
The first year at the bridge, it was called the Bridge of the Past, the Present, and the Future, and it was astrological, metaphysical. And there were so many people who came who really didn't, even though they knew Dorothy and they knew Buzz and everything, they really weren't astrologers, but they were interested in the spirit and the soul and everything. And after the very first year, they said metaphysical, astrological. And so that was a big switch way back then.
It opened it up a little bit. Well, speaking of switches, we're going to have to switch gears here and say goodnight. We've got about 5 minutes left in the show.
Thank you.
So thank you both for coming up here, and I feel honored to be a part of your first radio experience.
Yay!
We feel honored. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, all right? Wendy Coleman, Johnny Ruth Kuhn. So that about wraps it up here from live at Virginia Beach. I didn't get into a lot of astrology, which is what I normally do on the show, but I wanted to talk with these folks and have you listen to them and experience them. And go to their website, forpurposeinc.com or followthemoon.org.
If they go to either one, they'll find.
Okay, and that's on the show page. So if you're listening to this through Blog Talk Radio, those links are there. There's a link for Marvin and his website, and you can go there. I want to thank Howard for over here. For all the hard work he's done all week, too. Yeah. Not just tonight. So that's it. I'll be back on Friday with the Friday edition of Free Association Radio. That is, of course, the Friday Farcast. I don't have a guest lined up yet, but I'm working on it. So you know the drill. Use your head to discern what's real, your heart to stay open to what's possible. This is Robert Phoenix, and here's Philip K. Dick. I'll see you on Friday.
We are living in a computer-programmed reality, and the only clue we have to it is when some variable is changed and some alteration in our reality occurs. We would have the overwhelming impression that we were reliving the present, déjà vu, perhaps in precisely the same way, hearing the same words, saying the same words. I submit that these impressions are valid and significant, and I will even say this: such an impression is a clue that at some past time point a variable was changed, reprogrammed as it were, and that because of this an alternative world branched off.